Get ready for Changing Worldviews with Sharon Hughes, the 30-minute show packed with an hour's worth of information, bringing you familiar guests on important issues such as immigration, education, the Middle East, culture, religion, and the changing worldviews of Americans and the world. You've seen her on Fox News, you've read her on the World Wide Web. Now here's Sharon.
For such a time as this.
Freeing the minds of the brainwashed masses.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of Changing Worldviews today. Well, if you are watching the Olympics, you might be interested to know that NBC says communist Russia is one of history's most pivotal experiments. The 2014 Winter Olympics officially commenced on Friday, and the NBC broadcast of the opening ceremony has been called into question for a bizarre narration in which Russia's communist past is referred to as one of modern history's, as I said, pivotal experiences. For those of you that are more focused on Obamacare, today the Obama administration is giving employers more time to comply with rules requiring them to provide affordable health insurance for their workers. Companies with 50 to 99 employees will now have until 2016 to provide affordable coverage under Obamacare, a year later than expected. And in the meantime, word came out over the weekend that the Pope will side with the Palestinians in his upcoming trip to Israel. Pope Francis apparently plans to heed Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas's calls and use his upcoming visit as a propaganda move for the Palestinian Authority against Israel. That's according to Aruz Shiva News. The revelation comes from Rabbi Sergio Bergman, a member of the Argentinian parliament and close friend of Pope Francis, who claimed the Pope intends to define himself as the, quote, Che Guevara of the Palestinians and support their struggle and rights. Iranian TV aired simulated attacks on Israel and U.S. aircraft carriers over the weekend, and on February 8th, Breitbart News reported that Iranian warships set sail for U.S. maritime borders to, quote, send a message. And that is what we are going to be talking about today and every day this week on the show, the developments in the Middle East. We're also going to be talking about the threat of a cyber attack with author Ron Rhodes on his latest book on the subject, and much, much more. Stay with me when we get back from this break today. The nations that are mounting against Israel, Iran, Syria, and now Jordan. We'll be right back with very important information on today's show right after this.
You're listening to Sharon Hughes, coming to you from the Wild Wild West, and we mean wild.
For those that are just tuning in, author Ron Rhodes is with us today talking about his latest book, Northern Star Rising, Russia, Iran, and the Emerging End Times Military Coalition Against Israel. His books include The 10 Things You Need to Know About Islam, Northern Star Rising, as I mentioned, and also Ghosts, Mediums, and Psychic Phenomena, which actually he was on PAX TV's special on Encounters with the Unexplained, talking about the very things in his book I just mentioned. He's been on CNN and many television and radio programs across the nation. Ron, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
It's good to be with you.
Why is the president of Iran fanning this Islamic fanaticism into a flame that we've talked about many times on our show? What would you like to say about that?
He considers himself to be sort of a John the Baptist, preparing the way for the coming of the 12th Imam, that simply refers to a sort of a messianic Muslim leader who is supposed to overcome all resistance to Islam so that the entire planet will be Islamic. And what's very interesting is that Ahmadinejad has said that this will occur within 2 years. He says that we will soon know what it is like to live in a United States-free and Israel-free world. Sounds ominous, doesn't it?
Wow, 2 years.
Well, yes, and it's kind of interesting because all the government officials that he has installed in Iran are people who agree with him, and he's fired the people who don't agree with him. So he's got a government in place that is behind all of this. And when you consider the fact that there are many who believe believe that Iran has its eyes on developing a nuclear weapon. That's a very dangerous combination.
What do we know for sure?
That's a very good question, because there was a report released which called into question whether or not Iran was even developing nuclear weapons. And so for that reason, some people have backed off in their concern. Certainly there are intelligence officials around the world who think that's unwise. If you look at what the Israeli officials are saying, including the Israeli president, they all remain concerned that Israel may in fact be a target of an Iran nuclear strike in the very near future. And just to give you one example of what U.S. officials have observed, not too long ago, Iran was seen testing some of its missiles being launched off of a merchant ship. And what they were doing is they were launching these missiles up to about 300 miles in the atmosphere and then detonating them. The reason that's a concern is that United States military officials are very concerned about the possibility of what's called an EMP attack against the United States. That refers to an electromagnetic pulse. And the way that happens is that an enemy launches a nuclear weapon up to about 300 miles in the atmosphere and detonates it. And at that point, everything electronic goes out. Goodbye internet. Goodbye transportation. Goodbye microwave ovens. Goodbye anything electronic. And scientists tell us that that will last not 1 week, not a month, but possibly more than 1 year in terms of how long it will take to get things back up electronically.
My goodness, so how real is that threat?
They concluded that there is a very real threat, and the question becomes, do different nations have the knowledge to pull this off? And it's the conclusion of U.S. intelligence officers that Russia can do it, Iran can do it. In fact, a number of nations have the ability to take this into action. Now, the one thing that would be holding Iran back would be possession of a nuclear weapon. But even those who believe this report that came out about Iran maybe not having nuclear weapons, even they conclude that Iran probably will have nuclear weapons. And so this is not something that we should take lightly. I was going to say that the president of Iran has openly stated that he intends to get rid of the United States. And you can't do that without nuclear weapons. And so I think that the concern that U.S. officials have about this is very real.
And your book says Russia, Iran, and the emerging end times military coalition against Israel. So are you saying that Russia and Iran are merging together or will merge together, part of a military coalition that's going to come against Israel and perhaps the United States?
What's interesting, in Ezekiel, very specific nations are mentioned as joining together, and that would include not just Russia and Iran, but also Turkey and Syria and Libya, the Sudan. And so these nations are predominantly Muslim, except for Russia. And when Ezekiel actually wrote this 2,600 years ago, those nations were not Islamic. Islam didn't even exist yet. So people might have wondered, what draws all these nations together? What do they have in common? And it's only in recent history that it's become clear that the one thing that ties them together is the fact that they are Muslim. They are Islamic, and they hate Israel. It might interest you to know that even 20% of the population of Russia is Islamic. That surprises a lot of people.
20%?
Yes.
That is very interesting. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to ask Ron, in this coalition that he just talked about, is there an indication that Iraq is not among the invading nations? And also, what does he think about America? Is America involved in prophecy? That's been a question people have asked for generations. Want to see what Ron says about that, and also more about Russia and Iran locking arm in arm. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Exposing the worldviews behind the political, cultural, and ideological wars molding the minds of Americans and the world today.
In fact, Hitler wrote fan mail to the associates of Margaret Sanger of Planned Parenthood, who also was a eugenicist and who wished to eliminate the existence of two-thirds of humanity through her methods.
Changing Worldviews encourages listeners to get engaged and help turn the tide. It's everyone's civic responsibility.
Are we going to use this technology and knowledge to help and elevate people, or are we going to use our knowledge and technology to suppress them, to harm them? This is the goal of eugenics movements and those who have allied movements.
Won't you help continue to stay on this station in your area and reach even more listeners with a financial donation? Go to www.changingworldviews.com donate page and give either a one-time contribution or become a monthly partner. Or send your check to Changing Worldviews, P.O. Box 750624, Petaluma, California 94975-0624. Please make a donation today.
Muhammad said, and I quote, "I have been ordered by Allah to fight against people until they testify that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. The Quran describes Jews as monkeys and pigs.
Islam will come and it will conquer the UK, it will conquer Holland, it will conquer Rome, it will conquer the world.
Thank you, everyone, for staying with us. Ron Rhodes, author of his latest book, Northern Storm Rising, is with us today talking about Russia, Iran, and other nations coming together in a military coalition against Israel. And as he pointed out in segment one, if you're just tuning in, why Iran not only is interested in Israel being wiped off the map, but Mahmoud Ahmadinejad clearly indicated that he wants to see the destruction of America. Ron, these are really, how shall I say, very sobering possibilities here. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about this military coalition. President Bush said he looked in the eyes of Putin and said he saw his soul and that he was a good man. I wonder if he would say something different now with his increasingly friendly relations with Iran.
Russia has been returning to her old totalitarian ways, and there's a tremendous military buildup presently taking place. And in fact, Russia has signed an arms agreement with Iran to provide Iran over the next 25 years with all kinds of military equipment. And I'm talking about tanks and missiles and all kinds of explosives and different kinds of guns and rifles, just all kinds of stuff. And there's going to be a continuing military buildup in Iran in conjunction with Russia. It's interesting that most of the people that Putin has put in his own government are ex-KGB. Mm-hmm. And no longer is Russia sort of a calm little bear. It seems like the bear has come out of the cage, so to speak, and it's getting aggressive. Russia was seen, launching test missiles off the coast of France.
In just a minute, I want to ask you about Iraq and about America and this coalition of military force against Israel. But let me just ask you this question. Mutual assured destruction, or the MAD policy. Can you describe that to us? And also, will it serve as a nuclear deterrent against Muslim countries with nuclear capabilities such as Iran?
Well, that's a very good question. It used to work with the Russians. The policy basically said that if the Russians launched a nuclear attack against America, America would respond by launching a full nuclear attack against Russia, and thus both countries would be annihilated. That's called mutually assured destruction. And that policy kept both countries in check in terms of not launching any nuclear attacks against each other. But the fact is that you're dealing with a different kind of people with the Muslims, because they glory in the possibility of losing their lives as martyrs for Allah. In fact, Muslims believe that the only absolutely sure way of going to paradise is to lose your life in service to Allah. Therefore, there are many intelligence officials who believe that this mutually assured destruction policy will not serve as a deterrent for Muslims launching an attack against us, like with the Russians. You must keep in mind that the Russians were atheists. They thought this life was all there was, so they didn't want to lose their lives. But again, the Muslims believe that the moment they die, they'll be issued immediately into the presence of Allah.
Very interesting point. Now, this end times, if we can call it extremism among Muslims, an apocalyptic end of days kind of view that they have, mainstream Shiite Muslims envision that a great armed jihad will result in the subjugation of the entire world to Islam.
Mainstream Shiite Muslims have always believed that the governments of the world ought to be controlled by Islam. Now, to be fair, there are some Muslims who believe that they can live out their lives in any country under any government, but that's not true of the Shiites. The Shiites believe that every government has to be Islamic, and so therefore they believe that eventually the entire world will be Islamic, and they believe that this jihad, this final jihad, will take place under the leadership of the 12th Imam, this great messianic Muslim leader who is allegedly going to come in the future, and allegedly this individual will subjugate the entire world to Islam so that no Christians will remain, no Jews, no people of any other religion except Muslims.
So, Ron, why aren't more people talking about this in the mainstream media? I mean, are we just so politically correct or so afraid? What's going on?
Many intelligence officials were talking about this, and if you keep up with reading a lot of the secular literature about Iran and about the potential threat against the United States, there certainly are a lot of warnings taking place today, but I think that there's sort of a feeling among many Americans that we're invulnerable. We're Americans. we're the strongest nation in the world. And that kind of mentality, I think, can be dangerous because the fact is we're living in a different age today. When you have a situation in which terrorists can get their hands on nuclear weapons, that is a dangerous, dangerous scenario for America because, as I point out in the book, some intelligence officials believe that the chances of a nuclear attack against America are as high as 70% over the next 10 years.
My goodness. I think as we get further away from 9/11 can contribute to this lack of vulnerability, as you mentioned. Ron, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, ladies and gentlemen, I want to find out why, according to what he's written in his book, Iraq may not be a part of this military coalition against Israel. Why is that? And also the big question, is America in Bible prophecy? And if not, why not? Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Exposing the worldviews behind the political, cultural, and ideological wars being waged in our nation and world, Sharon packs an hour's worth of information into every half hour with news you can use.
Academia is often the wellspring of race hatred. This is something that we need to recognize. Eugenics, indeed, was a campaign to create a master race by do-gooders and progressives. They were attempting to create a utopia.
What's ending up happening is that Christians who say, I don't care about issues, they realize that's what's being used to silence the gospel. If they can silence the truth, they will silence the gospel.
You're being a watchwoman on the wall, Sharon. I say that with all sincerity. Appreciate what you're doing to sound the alarm, and we need more shows like yours.
Changing Worldviews is funded entirely through the tax-deductible donations of our supporters. If you've not done so already, renew your active support today. And if you're new to Changing Worldviews, would you consider helping us with a donation, becoming a monthly partner to help get the truth out and tell the world the side of the story that mainstream media doesn't report? Thank you so much ahead of time for supporting our efforts.
Hey, did you know that according to the Department of Justice, human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world? Did you know that human trafficking in Sonoma County really happens? Hello, my name is Dana Bryant, co-founder of Crossing the Jordan and member of the Sonoma County Human Trafficking Task Force. Crossing the Jordan seeks to reach these victims and bring them hope of a whole new life. Giving Hope Worldwide has given us a $50,000 matching grant, which means for every dollar you give, they will match it up to $50,000. Will you join us and help save lives? Call us at 540-0810 or find us online at crossingthejordan.org.
We're talking about Iran. We're talking about Russia. We're talking about the possibility of nuclear weapons in the hands of Iran. Ron, let me ask you, because as you talk about this military coalition coming together, which I think is something that really people need to keep an eye on as they see this forming, we do know in the Bible it says at the end times every nation is going to come against Israel, which is always a question mark for me. Does that include America? But let me ask you this question about Iraq. Is Iraq not going to be a part of that military coalition, and why not?
Well, that's a good question, and there's really two possible answers. There are some who believe that Iraq could be a part of the coalition because in addition to the nations mentioned specifically in Ezekiel 38, there's also the phrase, and many peoples with you will join you. So it's always possible that Iraq could be a part of those many peoples with you. However, I think that the greater possibility is that Iraq will not participate in this invasion. Many place this invasion early in a future tribulation period, and that's a word that Christians use to describe the very end times of human history, during which a sinister figure known as the Antichrist will emerge. And it's believed by many Christians, based upon Revelation 17 and 18, that this figure, this world leader, will actually set up his headquarters in a rebuilt Babylon in Iraq. And according to Scripture, this great leader will actually sign a peace pact with Israel that will last for a 7-year period. So the idea is, if this leader really does sign a 7-year peace pact with Israel, then he will not be a part of this invading force that launches into Israel. Once this coalition is destroyed, it could be that this Antichrist figure will actually try to take credit for it, as if it was he who did the destruction of these nations that went into Israel. So, it's something that's very fascinating in terms of what Scripture reveals about it.
Mm-hmm. And it's not cut and dry. And let me ask you the big question that I know that many have asked and many have tried to answer according to what they believe. But do you think that America is involved in Bible prophecy? And if America is not mentioned, what explains America's absence?
Well, that's a good question. It could be that America just doesn't play a significant role in the end times. That may be a little unbelievable, though, because the United States is the single greatest ally of the nation of Israel. And, of course, Israel is at the very heart of Bible prophecy. So it would seem that the greatest ally, the United States, it would seem that they would be mentioned in the Bible. Some speculate that maybe America will implode due to its ever-escalating moral and spiritual degeneration. Things are falling apart morally in this country. Still others suggest the possibility that America could be weakened by some kind of a nuclear attack. Harvard professor Graham Allison, who is a very well-known professor, says that it's much more likely than not that there will be a nuclear attack on U.S. soil in the next 10 years. Our economy collapses. We'll be greatly weakened in terms of our ability to respond militarily in different parts of the world. So that's a possibility. And then finally, I think it's a possibility that America could suffer an EMP attack. That's an electromagnetic pulse attack that knocks out all of our electronic components for a year or more. There's a number of different possibilities.
Very interesting. Well, I have to bring this up. Israel having land restored to them in the Six-Day War, now called the occupation.
I believe our best policy is to protect Jerusalem, not divide Jerusalem. And it's very clear that when God made promises to Abraham way back in what's called the Abrahamic Covenant, very specific land promises were given to Israel. And so even though I do believe we should pray for the peace of Jerusalem and to, get them to stop killing each other, nevertheless, like I said, I believe our best policy is to protect Jerusalem and not divide it.
When we talk about such issues, I always like to give our guests an opportunity to tell our audience, why should our listeners believe the things that you've said?
Well, Scripture says that Israel would move back into the land. That was prophesied in Ezekiel 36 and 37, and it began happening in 1948 when Israel became a nation. Ezekiel 38 and 39 goes on to say that after that time, alliances will develop between key nations, including Russia, Iran, Turkey, Sudan, Libya, and other nations. And one thing that these various nations have in their alliance is a common hatred of Israel. Iran's president says he wants to wipe Israel off the map. And we've talked about this messianic figure, the 12th Imam, who says he wants to make the entire world Islamic. Let me just close this way. The way that we know that a thunderstorm is coming our way is that we typically see ominous clouds on the horizon and flashes of lightning off in the distance and distant rumblings of thunder. Witnessing those signs, a person rightly concludes that a storm is coming. Well, I've entitled my book, Northern Storm Rising, because we witness the very signs starting to come together. And I believe the stage is being set for the eventual fulfillment of these verses.
Because I believe, Ron, that there is hope in the face of so much contradiction, would you like to say why you think there is hope?
There's great hope just in understanding prophecy. God didn't just give us prophecy so that we could understand what's going to take place in the end times. Rather, God gave us prophecy, number one, to let human beings know that He was real, and also as a motivation for people to turn back to Him. And that means that no matter what confronts us in the future, we will walk with God hand in hand right into whatever faces us. And that's what gives us true hope.
Well, Ron, would like for you to tell our audience how they can get a hold of your book. What's the best way to do that?
Well, you can get it at Amazon.com. You can order it from there. You can certainly order it at a discount from my website, which is ronrhodes.org, RONRHODES.org.
Okay, great. And thank you again for being with us.
Thank you.
The American walks every day, normal, going to work. He's walking downtown in Manhattan, and all of a sudden, two planes hit the Twin Towers, and they have no clue why would somebody do such a thing.
The deliberate and deadly attacks which were carried out yesterday against our country were more than acts of terror. They were acts of war.
Radical Islam has declared a war. Radical Islam is at war now with the West.
When I saw the second airplane hit, I knew jihad has come to America.
What happened in Bali and in Istanbul and now in Madrid are close to home for all of us. The tentacles of terrorism are reaching out to every corner of the world.
Every single country in the world is dealing with this on one level or another. You see that the Thais are dealing with it. You see that the Filipinos are dealing with it. The Europeans are dealing with it in Madrid. The Russians are dealing with it in Chechnya. The British are dealing with it in London and in Manchester. And of course you see in the Middle East, whether it's in Iraq, in Iran, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Egypt, and of course in Israel and Saudi Arabia. And you go to Africa and you see that jihadis are operating everywhere from Djibouti to South Africa. All of these areas that we refer to as separate wars, the Palestinian war in Israel, the Iraq war, they see all of these not as specific wars, but as fronts in a global jihad.
Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. As always, I encourage you to stay informed and pray informed. Coming up on our next show,
there are some very sophisticated people who work for governments, criminal organizations, syndicates, terrorist organizations that have exceptional skills that aren't just creating websites and uploading video.
We're going to be talking about the threat of a cyber attack with author Ron Rhodes on his latest book on the subject and much, much more. Tune in every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday on KDIA AM 1640 at 4:30 p.m. and every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sundays for our 1-hour live stream show, which you can access by going to changingworldviews.com, listen online, or by telephone at 424-222-5360 or online, changingworldviews.com. Click on the Blog Talk Radio link, and that'll take you to our online stream show. And there's also archives there as well. And so until I see you next time, this is Sharon Hughes saying it like it is.
Thanks for listening to Changing Worldviews with Sharon Hughes. You can get more information on today's topic or order a CD of today's show by visiting changingworldviews.com or writing us at Changing Worldviews, P.O. Box 750624, Petaluma, California, 94975-0624. You can also contact us at talk@changingworldviews.com. That's talk@changingworldviews.com. Our program is listener-supported, and we appreciate your tax-deductible donations to help us get the truth out on the important issues Sharon addresses on the show. So until next time, remember, stay alert, stay informed. We live in a changing world.